This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. This show was made by HCLTech, a company that believes in partnerships so much you can read their name on the Australian shirt. This show leans in hard on data and technology, so we are proud to work with HCLTech, leaders in their field. Do you hear this noise? In 1999, we had never heard anything like this before. We didn't actually even really understand what was happening. There had been hard hitters of the ball before, but no one hit it as hard, as often as Lance Klusener. Lance Klusener is remembered for stepping on a banana peel at the end of the World Cup semi-final. But the reason he was out there and that South Africa were close is because Klusener had one of the greatest World Cup performances of all time. And because he was so great all the way through this tournament, we have this game, this moment, and this memory was made. He was the last man on the battlefield for his defeated nation. He was a South African Spartan. But of course, for him, that is the wrong term, because they called Lance Klusener Zulu because he could speak the language. And in the end, he showed the same kind of fight that the people he was named after did. When you look at his batting average, the speed of his runs, the amount of wickets he took, and the moments he was involved with, no one has ever had a World Cup like Lance Klusener did. Would have been better if I had myself ready to come on at the end of that, wouldn't it? Welcome, everyone, to the Scoreboard. Morning, everyone, I should say. And welcome to the Scoreboard. Well, South Africa, and coming off the back of that trailer, not maybe the ideal time to show it, but hey, that's where we are. South Africa managed a calm chase where no one was sweating and they never looked like they would stuff it up and headbutt a wall for a while. Except for all the times when that didn't happen, of course. They turned what was a fairly routine chase against Afghanistan into what? Something like a razor climbing over a snail's... No, wrong way. A snail going over a razor's edge, right? They had Afghanistan in all sorts with the bat. That Omarzai in the tail stretched it out enough to give South Africa the chance to not do very well, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. It still should have been pretty comfortable, but in the end, South Africa was a little bit like, a jealous person watching their partner talk to their ex, right? I honestly don't know how a South African could watch a chase in a World Cup comfortably in any way, because that one didn't matter and it wasn't comfortable, right? It's like watching a nature video where you see like a big fish going after a smaller fish, but they've shown you a shot of a shark earlier and you're just waiting for the shark to eat the bigger fish anyway. It's not good, is it? But they won, and it didn't matter. At least Afghanistan again put themselves in a good position. But let's get to the scoreboard for the day. Check the tape. Oh wait, just realized I didn't go back to the start there. Let's go back to the start. This is now South Africa's record chasing since the 1999 semi-final, which of course is on the main channel. Is the it's not even the main part of our video, really. It's really more about Lance Klusener's overall 1999 World Cup. But of course, that particular game does come up. So they now have 13 wins and combined 13 losses and ties. I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. Just trying to make sure I updated that for the end of the game. So they are officially, since the midway through the 1999 World Cup, a 50-50 team when chasing, which is it's a remarkable thing, really. And what I wanted to look at here, as much as, obviously Rassie helped them in this particular case, but you do wonder why players like Rassie and some of the others have struggled as much as they have in chases. I mean, you would think that Rassie is a perfect player for a chase. That hasn't really borne fruit at the moment for them. However, what we can have a look at here is the times that they have chosen to chase, because that was something I was quite interested about. So if we go through this here, you will see that in there's the game, which I think actually, yeah, it's the 16th of June. I took that off the other graphic, by the way, so that one doesn't count on the other graphic, so that's fine. You could see that they chose to chase in 2003 against Bangladesh, who are obviously very, very new to cricket. 2007 it's a bit weird 2007 because they choose to chase against Scotland, Ireland, and Bangladesh, but also Australia. So it's a little bit more interesting there. West Indies in 2011, 2015, just a one game against Pakistan. 2019, do you remember they made a big deal of wanting to chase a lot more? So they did decide to chase against, the eventual winners, but certainly the number one team in the world coming into that World Cup as well. And then you could see all the way through here, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and then the Netherlands. I would say looking at this record, probably they're more likely to chase in a game where they think the opposition is not particularly strong. So it's certainly but the reason I bring this up is their record is very similar when they decide to bat second, as it is when they actually are sent in. But there is one real little difference that I found interesting when I was going through this, and it's this. So when they choose to chase, they do average around 33.5 runs in those games per wicket, I should say. Not in total, although sometimes for South African fans, it might have felt like it was in total. And when they lose the toss, they're averaging just around 30, right? So the point being that there is definitely a difference between them choosing and not choosing. But if you were playing them in the World Cup semifinals at the moment, unless you're India and it doesn't matter to you, chances are we know what teams are going to do. They shouldn't have really allowed Afghanistan in that game as many times as they did. Again, we've seen the tail struggle a little bit. And I think it's Pommy and Bangor said something really interesting. We've got some stuff on the tail later, but he said something really interesting about the fact that perhaps one reason that the tails are doing so well in recent times of one-day international cricket is because with the two new balls, it's actually once they sort of get to that 15 to 20 over mark, you can kind of face them and maybe you can't score quickly against them. Like we don't expect the tail to come in and slog, but it is a little bit different now. And you've got those balls that are 20, even 15 overs old. The bowling team doesn't get as much out of them. You can still get wickets, of course, if the opposition is attacking you. And some of the tails are not doing that. And obviously the player at the other end is. It's something worth having a look at. But I would say, what is this about the fourth game, I want to say, where South Africa haven't found a way to sort of go through. They're very good at bowling with those hard balls. Once the balls get a little bit softer, even their spinners look better with the harder balls. They just haven't found a way to be as successful all the way through the game. Anyway, optimistic, no, wrong button. Let's have a look at Keshav Maharaj. So Cheyenne came up with something really interesting today, which is, he's the guy that obviously won the runs, won the game against Pakistan with the runs. He's also, did he make good runs against the Netherlands as well? Anyway, slight side story, that one. But he, the question really was, is Maharaj a top 3 spinner in this World Cup? Which is a very fascinating one that Cheyenne came up with. So you could see coming into this, he was averaging in the low 30s and doing quite well. You would expect any South African spinner to have a little bit of a bump coming to Asia, just because, even though the conditions are better for spinners now in Asia in South Africa than they've ever been before. Thank you, global warming. It's still not the best place to bowl, right? So you expect this bump. But again, you can see he hasn't gone for many runs as well. And so, all things considered, I think he's had a very, very good World Cup. It's funny that Mitch Santner seems to be getting a lot of attention for his World Cup, rightly. But Maharaj maybe hasn't. And he maybe bowled one of the best balls of the World Cup as well. And was the winner in a game. So this is all the different spinners in the World Cup with a minimum of 10 wickets. So well done, Darian Dutt, for getting on this list. But I would say there's no bad spinners on this. You're not talking about part-timers. You're not talking about containing bowlers, right? To be able to take 10 wickets, at the very least, you're going to have to be more than a wicket a game. You can see Zampa up here is profiling as a strike spinner. The rest of them are not really profiling in that way. And you've got Jadeja obviously being almost unhittable, and Kuldeep there. But that's Keshav. That's pretty good, right? 14 wickets, average just under 25, economy of 4.4. As I said, a lot of talk about Mitchell Santner, who's also been outstanding, and Maharaj has been that little bit better. The one difference I would say about them and we'll actually, I think Shane's got a graphic about this as well. South Africa bowling averages is that actually no, I can go back and show you on the last graphic. The one thing I would say is that when Maharaj has been coming on, generally, Marco Janssen's been taking wickets. He quite often bowls in tandem with Rabada early on, or Kotsia. So again, 2 strike bowlers. So he's probably got more wicket taking pressure from the other end. And both of these guys are essentially defensive bowlers. And of course, in Asia, you expect them to get more wickets as finger spinners, but they are both essentially defensive bowlers in that way. So having some ability to be able to have pressure from the other end certainly is helping. And you would say that might even be the difference between the two figures, right? That South Africa's bowling attack perhaps has taken more early wickets than New Zealand's has, but they're both doing very good anyway. But this is Maharaj versus the other bowlers. You can see here he's still averaging less than the rest of the South Africans, and he doesn't really bowl at the death, right? And doesn't get the brand new ball. Although I wonder about that with him as a bowler, because I've always thought he's the sort of spinner who could do that. But anyway, economy is the really interesting thing here, and it's one thing that I've noticed a couple of times looking at the South Africans, that their economy as a bowling unit is often high. So I would say they're probably closest to the most genuine strike bowling team. So I'm not counting India in it as a team in that, because India also have a low economy. So when I'm saying a strike bowling team, I literally mean a team who is probably coughing up more runs than they should, but taking a lot of wickets. And so Maharaj is the one guy they sort of have there that is not doing it. So look, I think he's been fantastic, and I think we make a pretty solid case there that he certainly needs to be in the argument for the top 3 spinners. I'm not sure if you don't have him in the top 3 spinners of this World Cup. So Santner would be there, and Zampa are the other 2 that are very, very interesting, just because, Zampa is taking his wickets at a higher average, but has a lot more wickets. What's he got? 6 more wickets than Maharaj at the moment. And as I said, perhaps you could suggest that Santner hasn't had quite the backup that Maharaj has had. And Rashid's numbers have held up pretty well. There's a lot of people saying that Rashid's not doing particularly well. I think he's ended up doing quite well in this tournament. And certainly, I was worried about both of these guys. I didn't think they'd get to this area, but I thought perhaps they'd be more in this area. They've both done much better than that. And also, because it will come up later, it is interesting to see that compared to the other spinners, how much of a defensive spinner. This curve through the middle is pretty normal. These are the 2 outliers from that, right? And he's definitely profiling like a defensive spinner in this World Cup at the moment. But I actually have something on him later, so we'll get there. But let's talk about no, done him. He's done. South Africa's round robin stage is done. Only the very, very nerveless knockout games to come. But let's get to Omarzai, who he's a fascinating cricketer, right? You look at him in this tournament so far, you've got runs. Quite often, he'd be quite exciting with the bat, the way he goes about it. His bowling has been relied on in a way that just shouldn't be, but he's stood up at times and I think done really, really well. The ability to go for a lot of runs, but also take wickets. If you're a all-rounder and it's your second skill, you kind of need to do one or the other. You either need to go for no runs, or you need to be able to take wickets. He does half of that job perfectly, so he's doing that. But also in the field, he's a really good athlete. He moves around. I think it was the Netherlands. Of course, it was the Netherlands because it was a run out. But I think it was the Netherlands where he had a run out from the boundary, hitting the stumps. I really like him as a cricketer. But again, the same with Maharaj. We talked about Maharaj being, is he in the best 3 spinners? We wondered if Azmatullah Omarzai is in the best all-rounders, seam bowling all-rounders, especially of this particular tournament. So this is the pace all-rounders in this tournament. Now, remember that outside of, I would say the only one here who is a batting all-rounder is Baz the leader. So if Omarzai looks like he's in a much different position, that's because Honestly, Baz the leader should probably be more over here as well. But this is the amount of runs that he has made, and this is the amount of and the amount of wickets he's taken. So you can see it's 7 wickets, but I think was it last game of the game before he only had about 25 overs. So I think in the last 2 games they've had to use him a little bit more. But up until that point, they had Faruqi in the side, right? So he didn't bowl as much. So you're not going to expect as many wickets. And as I said, he should be in a different part of this graphic because he is a batting all-rounder. Baz the lead is the one who's probably outperformed his wickets, but underperformed his runs here. But just to be on this list, like, Chris Wokes, very decent back end of the tournament, obviously absolutely horrendous to start, so much so that he got dropped. Logan Van Beek, one of the great stories of ODI cricket in the last year and a half, the game against England where he stopped them scoring 500, what he did in the Netherlands game versus West Indies to get them to, or help get them to this tournament. Baz the leader, again, exceptional young player. And Marco Jansen, we've been talking him up, quite a bit. 17 wickets, incredible there. So to be on this list, I think to start with, Omarzai's doing really, really well. And I think you could make a very good case that of the seam bowling all-rounders, he's just made so many more runs than these other guys. Now, they're all in different positions here, although him and Baz the leader probably bat fairly similar spots in the order. But the other 3 guys, definitely more bowling all-rounders there. Anyway, being on the list is it's nice to be invited to the party to begin with. Anyway, and certainly today, they'd lost 6 wickets by the 38th over. He stretched that game out and gave them a chance when they were bowling. So this is his batting. This is his batting in the previous World Cup cycle. So you can see he's certainly doing a lot better. The not out today is doing a lot of the heavy work here, but it's not just about that, right? This strike rate boom. The last time I looked at his numbers, which I think might have been around the Asia Cup, I wondered, especially because what you want from your all-rounders is to play with a little bit more freedom, right? Brian McMillan was a fantastic cricketer, but I always thought that it was a shame that he couldn't kind of use his strength and to whack the ball around a little bit more. You want your all-rounders to either bat or bowl with freedom with their second skill. You want them to attack, but also with their first skill, you want them to know, well, they're more likely to stay in the side so they could score. So this is a really impressive strike rate, right? Especially if he was coming into this World Cup, averaging around 20, to score it around a run of ball while doing it, with a good average. I think this is really impressive. Where you want to put him in the World Cup, and just to go back to that previous page, I think Marco Jansen and Logan Van Beek are probably the 2 seam bowling all-rounders who've had the best tournament. Baz the leader's taken a lot of wickets, but hasn't made any runs. But Chris Wokes, I think you'd have to say that Omarzai's had a better tournament than him. So at worst, he's in top 4, and then it's probably between him and Baz the leader, right? And considering Baz the leader's had to bowl a lot more overs, and I think he's also very expensive with the ball, I think you can make a fair claim that Omarzai deserves to be up there with Logan Van Beek and Marco Jansen as the best seam bowling all-rounders. That's a huge win for Afghanistan cricket, considering all the other wins that we're just about to talk about as well. All right. Ooh. Okay. Now, we just want to talk about how much Afghanistan had improved with the bat. I think ahead of this World Cup, that was a worry that we had if they would score enough runs. And also score enough runs, but sometimes when they did manage to score runs before their top order, it was very, very slow. They've still got a bit of slowness in that top order outside of Gabaz and maybe Omarzai as well. But there's certainly a very big difference at the moment when they've just got a machine in that top order. 4 or 5 guys with Omarzai now as well. Ikram Alikil, made runs in this tournament. Maybe even 6 guys where they go. These guys can make runs. They don't have to rely on the batting of Rashid and Muhammad Nabi in ways that they have before. And they've had a lot of those sorts of players. Sami Shimwala and all those sorts of guys, Gulbuddin, where it's like you can bat, but you're not a batter. We're really starting to see that change. So if you go through here, these are all the batters with 350 runs in this World Cup. Oh, sorry, this was for Omarzai, wasn't it? Oh, well, this is also fantastic, but it goes into the other thing that we were talking about as well of, just how well they have done. He has done in this tournament, to be able to score that many runs. But to have, they had so many players who haven't made a lot of runs in this tournament as well. And to have Ibrahim here and Omarzai, and they're the only two. But they also have like a bunch of other guys in that top order who've made over 200 or 250 runs as well. It's really well stretched out, but fantastic for him to be on that list. And stupid of me to have missed it in the script. Oh, and this is his ball. Have I just skipped over him by accident? Oh, I did skip over him. Sorry, it's my fault. And this is his ball. I actually told Cheyenne to do a deep dive into this, and somehow I'm the one who stuffed this up. So again, you can see how much he's improved. So this is his bowling average beforehand. And look, this is low. I don't think he's going to be able to keep this up for a long period of time. But he only really needs to keep it up. If he could take wickets every 40, 45 runs, he's still doing really, really well. You can see, though, that in this World Cup where they've had to bowl him more, and he's up to about 4 overs per game at the moment, his economy is getting hit. So while his averages got better, and I'm okay with that, you can see that his economy has got a lot worse in this World Cup as well. But again, absolutely fantastic from him. And this is how many balls per match he used to bowl. So he's slightly down on his balls per match. Trying to wonder if that is because they don't really have another all-rounder, do they? But it might have been that maybe some of the pitches he's played on before, he hasn't been needed to be like, we know he bowls a lot more of recent times anyway, when they only have one other seamer and he plays as a second seamer. Perhaps they've had the second seamer in a few of those extra games. But again, he's not that far away from his normal kind of usage rate, right? So these numbers are very, very different to how he was in that previous cycle. But you've got to remember, when you have a young player like this, a bit like, to go back to Baz the Leader, like, you wouldn't really expect Baz the Leader to be scoring roughly the same amount of runs as Logan Van Beek in a tournament either. They would have expected him to at least be somewhere in the middle here. And so what you're seeing here is two young seam bowling all-rounders who are developing in real time in front of our eyes, being given jobs that in certain situations they're not always massively suited for. But I just think he's been fantastic. As I said at the top, I love the way he's fielded. I love the way he's gone about his cricket. I love that he's bowled at the death, despite being not even anywhere near as a regular bowler as someone like Baz the Leader is. It's a tough gig, and he's stepped up pretty much every way they've asked him to so far. Really starting to enjoy the way he plays. Now's the bit where I should have skipped forward to before. But how much has Afghanistan's batting improved? All right, so this is the 2003 World Cup. This is it's 2023. That's the year in, right? 2019 and 2015. So I followed them around a little bit in 2015. That was when I think I started writing about that they're a team of number 8s. 2019, they were not much better. They were still very much a team of number 8s. And you can just see the growth here. And if you look, but if you look at in between the tournaments, it isn't just something for this tournament, as we've talked about a lot so far there. So absolutely fantastic on average. And this is also good because sometimes you will see teams who are in development and still working on their games. They will get to a point where essentially what they are doing is they are not losing any wickets. But in order to do that, they're scoring really slowly. This is another really good progression. This is one of the best charts I've seen on Afghanistan cricket. And I don't want to get too overly excited with this, because this is just a World Cup, but it backs up all the other numbers we've looked at as well. The only other thing I would say, though, of course, is, light blue is Australia, and yellow is England, and green is India. This is the conditions that should suit them the most. But there's no doubt, having, watched pretty much every one of their games at all these tournaments, that they're just so much better now. And, that top order we were talking about before, having 2 batters with over 350 runs, having a lot of batters with over 200 runs, just having batters. I think if you go back to what I wrote about them in 2019, I wrote a big piece at the end of that tournament when everything was falling apart. I cannot stress how bad things were on and off the field for them in that tournament. They just look so much better in so many different ways. But let's just have a look at their pie chart. We've shown this a couple of times. And the reason is, if you compare this to Australia, the Afghanistan one just looks so much better. You've got Zadran with 19%, Omarzai, who's their number 5 with 18%, but you've still got 3 other guys here. You probably want, after a good start, you probably want Gabars to be closer to 16, 17%, and that is a little bit low. But here's your top 5. Okay, you accept one guy playing slightly under. Shahidi certainly stood up at times. Rahmat's played some really good innings. We talked about Omarzai and Zadran as well, in the last game. They've just been so much better. But this is a really, really good spread of runs. And you're still getting, Ali Keel probably hasn't had enough opportunities with the bat in this tournament so far. But you're still getting a little bit of runs out of Rashid. Again, Nabi has been a little bit disappointing in this tournament. But again, not an issue. You can accept your number 6 and your number 7 or whatever, or your number 8, all these 3 different guys, in order. They haven't been needed to make as many runs, partly because this is done so well. This is, England would kill for this kind of a graph, right? Pakistan should be quite similar to it. I'm trying to think of another team. Bangladesh would kill for this. This is what it should look like. It's huge for them. And I think, all of their top batters have been over 300, as I said, except for Gabars, who should have been over 300 because I think he was their leading run scorer after a few games. He's been averaging 31, though, a strike rate of 98. But in 2019, they have one player over 200 runs, and the same in 2015. Right? They lost today, but they pushed South Africa all the way through, and they really shouldn't have. They should have been blown away with the bat. But again, a top order player, well, a number 5 in this case, but a specialist batter, frontline batter, took the game as far as possible for them. And then their bowlers did a decent enough job, which was with a total that was at least 30 runs under par, but probably 50 to 80 runs under par, right? If we're being completely honest. Although they'd scored 80 more runs, South Africa might have been bowled out for 12. Such is pressure and of bigger chases and everything else. And I just want to get to Rashid Khan because we had him on that graphic before, and I was watching him today, and he has bowled the most balls between overs 10 and 50 in this tournament. One of the reasons is he's probably one of the few people who refuses to bowl in the first 10 overs. Almost everyone does it now, right? It's really interesting how flexible spinners are, seamers are at just moving themselves around into different positions. And it's, not something that we've seen all that much before. And you can see the majority of the bowlers up the top here are spinners, but it does feel to me that bowlers are a lot more flexible because usually, I think in the past, I probably would have had 10 to 40, but I put 10 to 50 because a lot of these guys also bowl between 40 and 45 now. And it's not just a thing that's happening in Asia. We're seeing that around the world with teams willing to do that, often using their death bowlers between 35 and 40 if the other team's flying. But either way, but Rashid Khan, so the point here being is that he has bowled a lot. In this tournament in that particular period. Oh, let's go back. And I think because he started so poorly, we haven't actually focused in on how good he has been all the way through. And you can see here, that first game, he didn't have many runs to defend against Bangladesh. I think that might have been one of the many games we talked about him coming on too late. This was one of the other games we talked about him coming on too late. But that's the pattern that Afghanistan always follow. They're very dogmatic with their plans. That hasn't changed under Jonathan Trott. Why would it? Jonathan Trott is a very dogmatic man as well. But you can see here, these economies have been really good. Only maybe Sri Lanka, scored decently off him. Some of these are incredibly low. And again, today, just bowled absolutely brilliantly. And what I wanted to do is just compare him. So these are all those same bowlers with over 200 balls from overs 10 to 50. You can just see here, very defensive, but certainly considering he got tap in those first 2 games, definitely one of the best defensive bowlers in this tournament. And I think that I think it might have been maybe after the India game, we had a look at his stats and, we understood that there was certainly a situation with Rashid Khan where his numbers weren't as good against the top 5 sides. And just to go back here, you could see here that his numbers have actually held up pretty well against the best teams outside of when India got hold of him ever since. And this is economy, and average is a different thing and everything else. But his economy and his average was struggling before, and he certainly found a way to bring that back. And I did say at the time I thought it was an outlier, and I think the more I've seen him in this tournament, and also I don't think it's an accident that it took him a little while to get back into that sort of one-day mindset of the way he bowled. And watching him today, he didn't chase wickets in the same way that I saw in perhaps earlier in this tournament, where he was really going after wickets. And I think in some ways he's an attacking defensive bowler in the same way that you could say of someone like Jasprit Bumrah, where his natural ball can take wickets, but he's at his absolute best when he doesn't give you anything, and you have to make a decision when you're facing him. And it's clear from this that teams are deciding not to over-attack him. 11 wickets is still, a decent haul, but they're not trying to over-attack him at all. But when you don't over-attack him, he gives you so few balls to score from. And I think today, I want to say 2 of his edges went for 4 as well. In fact, if you go back through this tournament, the amount of times that someone gets an inside edge on one of his wrong-uns, or an outside edge past slip, or even through the vacant area, there's a lot of the scoring shots I've seen off him, team to make mistakes. And if they got a couple of those edges, there was the Nabi drop and then the 2 edges from Rashid Khan. If they got one of those caught earlier, they could have really put a lot of pressure on. But certainly, I think he's had a better World Cup than maybe it looks. And maybe we expect of him, because we do think of him as this T20, incredible bowler. And just another thing that we were interested in, this is Tailenders batting by World Cup. So Cheyenne was having a look at this today because we wanted to have a look at something. And we found a weird little trend here. We wondered if the Tailenders had been batting better at this World Cup, because we feel like we've seen more of them. And that goes back to the Pommy Bangwa point I was putting out before. But you can see in 2015, Tailenders averaged 15, and Tailenders at this tournament have averaged 13, right? There was a bit of a dip in 2019. Anyway, this is the thing I found really, really interesting. So in 2019, you could see that they're scoring at about 5.5 runs and over. So I would assume a lot of them are coming in and giving it a bit of a whack. 2013, just under 5 runs and over. This tournament, it's 4.4, right? It's a lot lower than it has been. And I think what we've seen is, Tikshana and Pat Cummins and Maharaj, and we've seen a lot of Tailenders kind of just sticking it out. And again today, and stretching out their batting a little bit. And I don't know if it's a change of, the way the tournament is being played or anything else. But it's an interesting thing. It's not that often we focus on the tail, but maybe in South African games, they seem to dismiss the opposition's top order and they make us see the tail for longer. I don't know. But I did think these were very, very interesting patterns. Let's say the average. I think the economy is the one that really got to me. Naveen's bowling action. I've talked about this before, especially with Bumrah. It is incredible how far in front of the crease he actually manages to deliver the ball. And I knew that Naveen was the same. I didn't realize that Naveen, and got to remember here, their feet are in slightly different positions. But Naveen it looks like he's even leaning over further. Like, have a look at the angle of him compared to Bumrah. So Bumrah is very, very upright, and you can see that ball looks to me that it's being released a lot higher. But Naveen's still getting that. And you can also see with both of them, that looks like massive hyperextension of the arm. You see that with Jofra Archer. It's also another thing that's worth noting. This doesn't mean that they're throwing the ball, which I'm sure a lot of people will see these angles and would assume that. It actually means that when their arm is straightening, it goes beyond straight, which is something that happens to me as well. It's a really, really interesting thing. And we're now thinking that people who can hyperextend their arms might have a huge advantage, especially in bowling fast and maybe in off spin as well. But you can see here, Rabada is absolutely dead straight, and his ball is coming from what? Let's say, I don't know why, I must have missed the measurement on his. His ball was about 6 centimeters, I think, in front of the crease. And this is fairly normal. I think it's Kemar Roach who's back here, by the way. Kemar Roach is far further back than most bowlers. But you get the idea here that, so if you see a Naveen ball at 91 miles an hour, right, He's actually quicker than that. And that's the same with Bumrah. And it's why Bumrah can bowl at 86 miles an hour and still rush the top players. And it's why when he really gets his speed up, he's almost impossible to face because he's bowling off a shorter pitch than everyone else. So just a really interesting. I think this is an interesting new trend that I think there's about 5-6 bowlers in the world that I'm aware of now who do this. I don't know if it's an easy thing to coach or anything, but if I was a young bowling coach, my friend Kath Dalton just got a job coaching. Was it Molten Sultans? I'd be saying to her, "Is this something we can coach into people? So you can get it further." And it's worth talking about this. There's a video I did on Jasprit Bumrah on the main channel a few years ago. We talk about how Ray Linwell used to have when it was the back foot no ball, Ray Linwell would drag his foot. So we have seen bowlers shorten the pitch in ways before. And in both cases, in Ray Linwell's case and Bumrah and Naveen's case, completely legal. So there was a bit of absolute nerdery for you, but let's get to, I suppose, the biggest news story of the day. Sri Lanka have Sri Lankan Cricket, I should say. So the board have been suspended by the ICC. What do I want to say about this? I think it's an interesting one because I saw some people saying the ICC need to be consistent with this. And they were talking about Afghanistan. And the fact that Afghanistan, got rid of their women's development when they came in. So their government is certainly very involved with their cricket. Pakistan, Imran Khan was certainly involved over there. You could argue that the Supreme Court of India was very involved. Obviously, we've had similar things in Zimbabwe and in South Africa with their governments. I'm trying to think if any other governments have been involved. I mean, there have been committees even into English cricket, but I don't think they've had decision-making stuff. There's also the Scotland cricket, I suppose, at the moment as well. Anyway, but in Sri Lanka's cricket's case, you have a situation where the sports minister signs off I think it's the squad, isn't it? Maybe not the actual 11, which shouldn't happen. And so there's certainly been interference there. But the question would be then, why has this happened now, right? There's been interference from politics in Sri Lankan cricket forever. Why has this happened at this stage? Well, as we talked about yesterday, they have gone to unprecedented levels of omnishambles. And it really has it's been funny if you're not a Sri Lankan cricket fan. The board's been fired, the board's been brought back, there's an interim board, maybe there's not an interim board. The president's involved, the sports minister's involved. It's just been like president or prime minister, might have been prime minister, but just bouncing around everywhere, right? Anyway, there certainly is political involvement when it comes to cricket and the government and how cricket is run in Sri Lanka. My guess is, and I'm basing this partly on some of the phrasing in the Cricinfo piece that Nagaraj and Fidel have written here, but also I put out some messages when I read their piece. It does feel like it's the Sri Lankan Cricket Board who might have contacted the ICC and done this. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they want to get the government off their asses. But also, the other thing I would have thought is that if it's all falling apart and it's just getting bounced between different parts of the government and, Arjuna Ranatuga is involved, someone else will be involved in everything else. It actually makes a lot of sense to kind of just shake that loose and start again. And that's what this has done. They don't, from what I checked, the men's team don't seem to have any games coming up in the next little while. I didn't get a chance to check the women's team. Obviously, this is all kind of just happening at the moment. I don't think this will affect them, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. It's an interesting precedent if Sri Lankan cricket has done that because, as I said, there is already political involvement. And so what do the ICC say after this? They say, it's okay if your sports minister keeps signing off on your teams, but as long as you don't, the actual board isn't sacked and reinstated every 5 minutes. Where do you draw the line? And that goes back to the conversation at the start. There's been a lot of governments who've been involved in cricket boards. And those are just the ones off the top of my head, right? I think Nepal might have been another one. This happens a lot, is the point. And I think a lot of people are a little bit upset at the ICC for getting involved. But it does, if they do get involved in this, they can't turn a blind eye to many, many other times when these things happen. But they will, because they have before. And as we've seen with, there were many times they could have stepped in with Zimbabwe and they didn't. Anyway, just bringing it all up to follow it on from yesterday. And one last thing, there was this is a story that that I worked on in a podcast a little while ago about a cricketer called Bob White, who was known as Knocker. who passed away, I think, within the last 48 hours. And there's a couple of reasons I want to talk about him. But one is because he was involved in perhaps one of the craziest cricket moments that has ever existed. And it really is an incredible one. But also, Noer had this incredible career. So you can see here, he played 582 matches in his professional career, and he scored 1,300 runs and took 829 wickets. But what I really love about this is when he played for Middlesex, he played as a batter and essentially got let go by Middlesex about 6-8 years into his career, and just went to Notts and literally taught himself how to bowl. I think Fred Titmus was around at that time, and I think someone told me on Twitter today he copied Fred Titmus's action, and it's something I actually wanted to talk about Noer because I've been speaking to him recently. But there's just so many fascinating parts to his life. He should have played first-class cricket. I think it was in 1956, but he didn't end up playing, and he made a decision not to play his first game, and it was a huge mistake because he wasn't seen by the UK government as a professional cricketer. It meant that he had to go and do national service for 2 years. So he actually missed out on 2 years as a professional cricketer, went off in the military. But he was a groundsman before that. So essentially, he was a groundsman for a couple of years at Lords. Then he went on to the playing staff at Middlesex, played with them for ages. And his career started, you can see here, where is it, 1958, right? 1958 was the first year he played first-class cricket. 1980 was the last year he played first-class cricket, right? Absolutely incredible. So what does he do in 1980? He becomes an umpire, and then he umpires through till, I think, the early 2000s. He told me that he was one of 2 people that he knew that had a 50-year on-field career in cricket. And I don't know if that was true or not, but he certainly that was what he told me. And it's a hard one to look up because of the way these things work. But the reason I was talking to him in the first place is because, as I said, he played in one of the weirdest games of cricket ever. It was a first-class game between Middlesex and Kent, and it was an outground. I think it was in Tunbridge Wells. And Tunbridge Wells is just south of London. Middlesex is obviously a North London team. And so what happened was they played day one was on the Saturday. They had a rest day on the Sunday, and then they were playing Monday, Tuesday. I know that sounds weird to modern ears, but that was how first-class cricket and Test cricket used to be played. So they play in Tunbridge Wells on the Saturday, and then they all decide, well, we're not that far away. Let's just all go home rather than stay here. So the whole team go home. Noer was not out. So they rolled Kent for not too many runs. Noer was not out, and I think they needed maybe another 50 runs or so. I forget all the details, but they needed about another 50 runs to be able to go past Kent and get a first innings lead. I've done a whole podcast on this, but it's too fascinating not to tell you the story. So on Monday morning, Noer is traveling with the 12th man, and I think one of the other batters who'd already been dismissed. And the 12th man was actually a South London guy and knew the traffic a little bit better. And he said, guys, we'll need to, you pick me up on the way through. We'll go the back roads. We'll get away from the traffic and we'll get down. So Noer, the 12th man, and the guy who's out turn up at the ground. No other Middlesex players there. Time goes by. No other Middlesex players turn up. Now the umpires say, well, you're going to have to get padded up. So Noer puts his whites on. He goes out in his pads, literally goes out into the middle. All of Kent are out in the middle. The umpires are out in the middle. There's no other batter. The only people who are there are a dismissed player and the 12th man. It's ridiculous. The umpires say to Noer, you're going to have to declare the innings. And he's like, well, I'm not the captain, so I can't declare. And then they say to him, well, you're just going to have to do it. And he's like, no, I'm on 44 not out. This is a young professional player making his way for Middlesex. He's like, I'm not going to declare on 44 not out. And he doesn't. So the umpires then have to make a decision, right? You can't time anyone out because the batters are technically at the crease. They're just not at the crease. Also, the timed out law didn't exist at that time, so they couldn't use it. So the umpires do something that, as far as I'm aware, in a professional game, this is the only time it's ever happened. The umpires decide to forfeit the innings. Sorry, not forfeit the innings. Declare the innings for the batting team. And then when that happens, some extra bowlers turn up and they get the Kent players to go out and field for them. And it's all ridiculous. Anyway, Noer just had an incredible career in cricket. And when I chatted to him, he was talking about Garfield Sobers and playing with Sobers and what it was like to be his teammate and everything. And we talked about a lot of the great cricketers. We talked about that incident as well. And sadly, he's now passed away. But I like to think in his last moments, he thought to himself, I am 87. I'm not declaring. You're going to have to end this for me. Anyway, that's the end of the scoreboard today. It's really important to celebrate some of those lives, especially the players like him that we don't always get to hear the great stories on. I'm going to take a break here. And then after the break, we will come back with your questions. If you've got super chats, certainly line them up. And if even any other comments, and if this is your first time, like, subscribe, do all those things that you do. We'll have a quick break here, and then we'll come back with the rest of the scoreboard. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geoblock. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today. All right. I think I've got a few here. A couple of super chats as well. Remember, Anuj has put a super chat in, but I don't see his message. So Rakesh, if you see something from Anuj later, certainly get that in. I felt like I had a lot more. Anyway, feel free to keep putting the questions in chats in, but I feel like I had more starred and now I've lost them. But thank you to Anuj for his support. And Anant, who says, the last fault by Pethlaquaya reminded me of Klusener. Apt in a week you made the video on him. Which other players ever reminded you of Klusener? Yeah, I mean, I don't think Pethlaquaya does remind me of him, but I know what you mean from that particular shot. It's an interesting one. I think someone was commenting that the interesting thing about Klusener is that you don't hear a lot of South African players call him their hero. And considering he had an incredible peak and should have been a very inspiring player, but I think he was so different physically to everyone else that I'm not really sure that there is another comp for him. I'm trying to think, because what you would need is someone with that physicality, that big, the strength and everything else, but also who has kind of their own style of batting. In some ways, Chris Gale is a little bit, I know he hits in a different way than Klusener, but again, he's got his own sort of method. I was trying to think if someone like Richard Levi might be another kind of player, because I think Corey Anderson might be another one, but they're all a little bit different. So what I think is interesting about Klusener is he was kind of, because and I'm just guessing here, I will try and get him on a podcast and talk to him about this. Huge shout out to him and thank you for doing the promo for our video as well. But I'd love to know how it developed, because it's like a really bottom hand sloggy technique, but it's also got elements of batting in it. So it's not like Lance Cairns, or I'm trying to think of another, one of those Craig McDermott or, Pat Simcox, those sort of, but they're also big, strong guys who hit the ball like Klusener. But there's something about it that's batting, but it's not a proper batting technique, right? And I can see why, even as he got good, he probably didn't always think about himself as a batter, and also certainly as a frontline batter. And also South Africa maybe, misused him because they were like, look how it looks. It's really, really interesting. In fact, it's like a less elegant, maybe slightly more muscular version of Graham Pollock. Graham Pollock is certainly more of a traditional batter than Klusener was. But again, I would have thought that there's something in that technique that is similar. So I don't know how he came about it and everything else. And I know a lot of their six hitting came from, I think, when he wasn't he injured from bowling, and he just started range hitting and smacking bowling machines everywhere, and that became, he felt more confident sort of hitting through the line at that point. But if you haven't seen the video, it's really good. And I know during the World Cup, like, you might want to watch current stuff and everything else. But I promise you, if you don't know who Lance Klusener is, you're going to be blown away by some of that video. And if you do know who he is, it's nostalgia. Miko says, I don't have words to describe this. Such a young budding cricket team with the potential to be great in all three formats. My heart goes out to them. As a young cricket fan, I couldn't imagine myself. Oh, I'm assuming he's talking about Afghanistan here. I hope. I think it's really interesting how the narrative has changed on them. If you go back to the first video we did on them as a team, we certainly at that stage talking about them as the good news story. And they're still the good news story, but we were talking about them as the good news story, as the plucky underdogs, as the, people that we want to back and all this sort of stuff. And I think as the tournament's gone on, it's been more about the cricket, and that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that there was certainly a tournament where I wrote about that. In fact, it might have been in 2019 when I wrote the big piece in the end, where I was like, they were desperate to be thought of as a cricket team and not as a promotional stunt or the fun underdogs or anything. They were desperate to be known as a cricket team. And I think they've earned it right now, right? And who knows what will happen in the next T20 World Cup or whatever in their future. But I think it's been absolutely, it's been brilliant to see them develop all the things that I've been writing about for years. So many of them have been overcome in one place. Probably want a third seamer, although they've got some other seamers around, but probably want one more really good seamer available to them so that they can be as good in either conditions. MT says, confused about Sri Lankan cricket suspension. How is the government's involvement any different to that of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other countries on their boards? So the main difference at the moment is that the board itself has been sacked, then reinstated, then sacked, then reinstated, then sacked, and reinstated. So I think the chaos has played a part, MT. But as I said before, I also think that it is possible that the Sri Lanka Cricket Board has asked for this to happen because it was getting really bad and it was absolutely horrendous. And so they certainly needed to do something in order to fix the whole situation over there. But you make a good point. And, it's none of that is not true, right? I think that's very fair to say that cricket boards have been massively involved. Yusufan said, and I should have remembered this myself, actually, because I was talking to Mark Machado about this before. But so the Football Association of Sri Lanka, I really don't mean that. The Football Association of Sri Lanka, who I would like to thank for my my cup of tea and my press accreditation years ago when I went to watch Sri Lanka play Malaysia. If you're a football fan and you want to know how I write about football, I wrote a piece about Malaysia Sri Lanka football game that is in the blizzard. There was a lot of talk about bats. There were actual bats in the stadium. I've never seen anything like it. Anyway, the football board association was suspended. The rugby association was suspended. Olympics and netball haven't gone there yet. Don't know how the basketball guys are going. But yeah, it's clear that there's some issues in Sri Lankan administration. And when I wrote about, I only really know a little bit about netball in Sri Lanka, and I know about cricket, obviously, and I know about the football. The way that the sports are governed over there is not good. That may be an understatement. Robert says, Jared, if you're a betting man, would you take India or the field? Bookies seem to have India slight odds on. I would take India, I think. I mean, I have to have a look at the numbers, obviously, Robert, to give you that. But I would think that it's weird, isn't it? Because it's 2 knockout games. No, I think I would still take India over the field, unless the odds were massively, gave me something for the field. But yeah, I think I think I felt that way for quite a while. Just off the top of my head, I'm just thinking that, especially with New Zealand's injuries, but if South Africa, if I knew South Africa were batting first in both games, then I'd be more interested. From his super chat from before. Just wanted to say great work by you. Well, thank you very much. Following you since you made that video of analysis on Kohli's shot. Yeah, I really love being able to do that, actually. It was that one almost killed me because, again, we're working at that stage. I was running my channel, but we're also running 99.94, and it was like really, really hectic. And looking back, so this time, and I suppose it's having a bigger team available to me and having Cheyenne and CS and Estelle even chipping in on the writing. Bayram might have done some writing at one stage on this as well. And then also Muku having assistants and everything else and all these different people. But during that last World Cup, I think the Kohli one was one of the few videos I actually made. Everything else was alive like this. In fact, it was where we started this show. And so it took me forever to get around to that Virat Kohli, but I was absolutely desperate to get it out. And it still gets masses of views. And it's something that, I watch a lot of basketball YouTubers, and they just do such incredible work of breaking down plays, Mo Dakil and Thinking Basketball and even someone like Adam Maharaj and some of the others when they do it. And it was something I really wanted to. Sam Facini is actually someone. In fact, Sam Facini, probably watching him do the NBA Finals really helped me, I think, get this show even better. And really just wanted to. That's why we do this show, is to be able to show people actually what is happening out there. Maybe take an off comment from not off, but a comment from a commentator and expand on it, or something that me or Cheyenne or CS or whoever has seen. Go through the video when we need to go through video, do the data dives and all that sort of stuff. And thank you very much. And Orville says he's going to use Surfshark to watch the Patriots game this weekend. Look, for those of you who are in the chat every day, I have nothing but love for you. You made this show happen. We had no idea when we came to the new channel if anyone would come over, and you guys have. And so thank you very much. And you're already liking, and you're already subscribing, you're already commenting and everything else. If you can use Surfshark, and certainly if you need to use Surfshark, the way that Orville is using it is exactly how I use it, right? Like, sometimes I find myself in countries where I need a VPN or, need to be able to watch cricket outside where the rights, no one has the rights in the UK. There's many different workarounds I have, but I joke about it in the show, in the ad for Surfshark. It really does matter, right? It really is a very, very important thing for my job to have a good VPN. Anyway, I have one last quick break, and then after the break, we will come back and I'll see if there's anything else in the chat. But I'm Jared Kimber, and this is Scoreboard. Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical context. All right, we'll finish up. I think my kids are downstairs loose, so I'll need to go down there in a moment. But Kingfisher says, why does Lungi and Geedy keep bowling those predictable rubbish slow balls every time, even after getting hammered by tailenders every game? It's his main delivery is the main part of it, and he's had incredible success for it. I know he hasn't had as much of recent times. I've got this thing about slow balls that I think that people who rely on slower balls, there are times, especially when it comes to probably less so his knuckleball and everything else. But if you're relying on your cutter, I got this from Dwayne Bravo. So you'd watch Dwayne Bravo, and there were certain years when no one could hit him. And there are other years where he got absolutely hammered. And I was like, what's happened? What's the difference? And I think the difference is the amount of revolutions you can put on the ball. And if you're not putting enough revolutions so that you change the path of the ball in the air and then also off the pitch, what happens is you're just basically bowling rollers, right? And those are easier to hit. Why is Ngidi not going away from them? He trusts his best ball. It's just not his best ball at the moment. Does that make sense? It would be like saying, trying to think. It'd be like saying Kieran Pollard keeps getting caught at long on and long off against a spinner, right? So Kieran Pollard shouldn't keep coming down the wicket and playing that. And Kieran Pollard would be like, well, that's my best shot. Like, yes, I've gone out a couple of times to it, but it will come back. Puneet says, I just saw your Lance Klusener video. Awesome. Please do one on finishes. Well, Puneet, if you go back, I reckon it was in the IPL a couple of years ago, we did a huge one on Dhoni with a big chunk on Bevan as well. So we have done finishes. Klusener was obviously more in that Kieran Pollard style of finisher. And, you sort of have your Chris Harris, Dhoni, and then you have the Chris Gale, Michael Klinger. There's a name for you, Virat Kohli kind of finishers. So there are different kinds, but we have done a very big video on finishes before. I say big video, I have absolutely no idea. Ayush says that Peth Liqueo is from KwaZulu Natal as well. It could be a thing there. It's not something I'm aware of, but why not? Pacman says, how did you monetize yourself so you can travel so much? I haven't actually traveled since we've gone to the YouTube emailer podcast model, Patreon model, buy me a coffee model, whatever you want to call them. Partly because I want to put the money back on the screen. So I don't really want to be in a situation where I'm sending myself around on trips. Unless, like, if I have a sponsor that said, we would actually like you to be at this World Cup, then I'd be like, great, I'll need a little bit of extra money for that. And I would do it. I could have gone to the last T20 World Cup. I probably could have gone to this World Cup if I'd wanted to. I did the Ashes with SEN, the Australian radio station. I'll probably be touring again with TalkSport next time TalkSport need me to travel somewhere. New Zealand, I want to say. But I don't know if they've got another series before then. I might be doing as well. So, yeah, I'll do those. But, yeah, at the moment, I haven't monetized to a point, Pacman, where I think it is worth me doing that. But in the future, I will be doing that because there are other advantages. And you get to, went to South Africa a couple of years ago with TalkSport, and literally I just spent the whole time I was there talking to South African spinners. Those sorts of things are much harder to organize via WhatsApp and, getting people's numbers. Whereas you can just grab Paul Adams and go, can I have 5 minutes? I just want to do this. And then you spend 25 minutes with him. Then he gets annoyed. But at the moment, I think it's better off I've got Bayram, obviously. I've got some other co-hosts of podcasts that will be coming in soon. Estelle will start joining podcasts. I'd much rather pay talented people to work with me and work on my stuff than I would to go to India. And I wouldn't be able to do this particular show in India as well. And this is a big part of, what we want to be able to build. This is almost impossible if at the grounds. And if I did this show, I wouldn't be able to do the other videos on the other channel as we currently stand. Yuvanas says, can you seam the ball with a gun barrel straight seam position? Yes, you can. Amon says, just want to thank you for your works. It's probably the highlight of my YouTube viewing. So for those of you who don't know, who've never created stuff, I remember the first book review I ever got of my book years ago, where it was like, this guy was gushing, saying, this is the cricket writer of the future. And, I'm so excited to read his book, blah, blah, blah. And then there was one bit of the book, which he rightfully said, this bit was a bit of padding. He probably didn't need to put this in. Just so you know, when you write the word probably, that's all I'm reading. But thank you very much, Amon. And thank you for all your comments so far. And to everyone, really. And Gautam says, how come you not rate Rohit as an all-time, top 5 all-time batter? And Kohli, Sachin, Sangha, and Rohit. Can't think of anyone fitting better. Respect your opinion, but most people would disagree with you. I said he wasn't an automatic top 5 player. I think you'd have to do it a lot more. Well, it's really interesting because you don't have you don't have a lot of really good players on that list. So you don't have Viv Richards, and Viv Richards is certainly a better player than Rohit Sharma is. So he would automatically go in there. You don't have Josh Butler, who again is that other kind of ODI player. You could put Dhoni and Bevan and those sorts of guys in there as well. I think Rohit's fantastic, but you've picked a really interesting subsection. You haven't put Ricky Ponting in there as well. You've picked a really interesting subsection of players. I think he's got an argument to be in the top 5, but I'm not sure he's an automatic top 5 player. He's certainly in the top 15 without any issue there, and he's probably top 10 pretty comfortably as well. But I would have to go through it, Gautam, step by step. But I don't think he is top 5 ODI player, but perhaps on this World Cup and, his overall World Cup allows him to move slightly more up that order. But you've gone with a very, very modern list here. And it's very important to say that ODI cricket has been played for a long time, and some of the older players were absolutely fantastic as well. And what happens now is we have what I would call number inflation on some of these players. And so when you look at them compared to other players, you might go, what's going on here? But coming into this World Cup, Gautam, Viv Richards had almost an identical record to Rohit Sharma and did it 30 years earlier. And you don't have him in your list. You're talking about probably still the greatest ODI player of all time in Viv Richards, and you don't have him in your list. And you're asking why I don't have Rohit in my top 5? Come on, man. What are we talking about here? Anyway, thank you to... oh, wait. Rudridge just come through. Do you ever do commentary on a game? I commentate all the time. I did radio commentary mostly, or almost exclusively. I do SEN, which is a radio station in Australia. I do Scoreboard in the UK. Who else have I done? I've done other stuff. ABC I used to do until I told them that they should improve themselves, and they never hired me again. But yeah, so I've done lots of radio commentary. It's probably over the last 5 years since I left Cricinfo, I probably made more money radio commentary than I have anything else up until recently when this has all started to go off a little bit more. I love doing commentary, and also because of the kind of weird person I am, I can do the analyst job. So literally, the Andy Zoltzman, Andrew Sampson type of job, or what Mazza does on the TV. I also do the color commentary, so the experts chair, where it's generally ex-players. I'd be one of the few people in the world who's not an ex-player who does that. And then I also do the ball by ball. So kind of whatever the particular broadcaster wants of me, I kind of fit in and do that, and hosting and everything else as well. But that's it for me. I will see you again. We've got 2 games tomorrow. I should know this, shouldn't I? I just never know. I feel every show I end. There's cricket tomorrow. Yeah, there's 2 games tomorrow. I knew there was. Nailed it. I'll show you a little bit more of the Lance Klusener, but honestly, if you haven't seen it, it is absolutely. I cannot. We spent ages on this. It's something that we're all really, really proud of. Please, if you have a chance, go and watch it. But here is just and like a little snippet of Lance Klusener. Do you hear this noise? In 1999, we had never heard anything like this before. We didn't actually even really understand what was happening. There had been hard hitters of the ball before, but no one hit it as hard, as often as Lance Klusener. Years later, Ricky Ponting would tell me that just watching him range hit felt like the game was changing right in front of their eyes. And of course, Lance Klusener is also famous for one of the greatest chokes in cricket history. In fact, while history now remembers Australia for, all the World Cup wins, South Africa of the late 90s were certainly one of the best ODI teams we have ever had. Australia had been the pioneers in ODI cricket. But by 1999, it was South Africa who was the most progressive side out there. Even the Aussies were copying some of their methods. And between the 96 and the 99 World Cup, South Africa won 78% of their matches. In terms of run differential, they were a +9 per wicket. The next best was Australia at 2.7. And no other team had a win-loss ratio of better than 1.5. South Africa were at 3.5. They were just one of the greatest limited overs teams of all time. There is absolutely no doubt. And in that side, they had Lance Klusener, who may have actually had the greatest World Cup of any human right up until this moment. He is now defined because of a mix-up with the Tailender, not the fact that he completely changed our sport with his batting and was also pretty handy with the white Dukes ball. Lance Klusener is remembered for stepping on a banana peel at the end of the World Cup semi-final, and not the fact that the man they called Zulu had arguably the greatest World Cup of all time. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my